What is going on, YouTube people? New York Cards and Comics here. Today, fun little topic. Manu, friend of the channel, 9.9 Newsstand. Been on numerous live streams with him over on Justin's channel. We have spoken in DMs, on the phone, the whole 9 yards. We've been what I would consider a hobby friend for well over a year now, at least. He is the one, if you're not familiar, kind of broke open the CGC nonsense with the reholder gate, whatever you want to call it. Recently interviewed Matt Nelson with himself and Dave from West Coast Avengers. He had a fun little IG post over the weekend, and this is something in my end of the year 2022 video I predicted for 2023, which did not obviously happen. I never actually made a formal prediction video for 2024, but this probably would have been on it again. And that is, should PSA get into the comic book grading space? It's pretty much the one thing they are not in. They've obviously are the dominant force in trading cards. They're in Funko Pops. They're in video games now, VHS, coins, autograph authentication, the whole 9 yards. The big hole in their little house is comic books. That is the one part of their portfolio they are still missing. And to me, it just always made sense because of that very reason. But now, if they were ever hesitant at all with all the CGC nonsense that has gone on the last month to month and a half, it really has shined a light on the utter lack of competition in the comic book grading space. No offense to CBCS fanboys, they're just not it. CBCS is not equipped to be any sort of real competitor to CGC. They're just not. They are not the best run company, in my opinion. They have a whole host of problems that they would need to fix to even come close to it. And quite frankly, they've had their shot. They've been around for a while, and they've just never really closed the gap, even with all this nonsense going on. On top of that, you have CGC talking about 9.9 pre-screens now, and people are freaking out about that. Regardless, on the card side, we have legitimate competition. Like, don't get me wrong, PSA is king of the world. They are the Death Star. But we have a legitimate rebellion. SGC is a very viable grading company, very popular, have a very hardcore niche audience. Beckett's Beckett. People like them, but they're not a serious threat to PSA, in my opinion, anymore. And then there is CGC. CGC, people seem to like them for PC. Very popular on the TCG side of things, have not taken off in the sports card side of space quite as much. But regardless, we have other places to turn to. If PSA really crapped the bed on something and everyone got super mad, you could go to SGC, you could go to Beckett, you could go to CGC, and then there's the pop-up companies as well, even below that. But we have real viable options on the card side. On the comic side, other than CBCS, and that's a real distant second place, there is nobody. Now, I don't know if PSA could come into the space and knock CGC off the throne or anything crazy like that. I'm not talking delusions of grandeur, but it wouldn't take much for them to establish themselves as a strong second place, almost like SGC to PSA on the card side. And then maybe eventually they can chew away at that. The one advantage that, to inverse that, SGC does not have the financial backing and the size and the infrastructure to rapidly go after PSA. They're in it for the long haul. On the flip side, if PSA went in the comics, they actually do have the infrastructure, the financial backing, all that stuff to make a legit run at CGC if they wanted to. Now, would the secondary market accept it? That's a lot. Ultimately, that's really what it comes down to. As we all know, how PSA built their empire on cards is because their cards comp for the most. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I want to grade my cards. I want to grade my cards to sell, so I'm going to send it to the place that sells for the most money. And you have the same thing on the comic book side with CGC. That being said, I desperately think we need someone on the comic book side to come in and shake the snow globe. Now, what would it look like? I don't know. Would they go with a traditional PSA style label? This label here expanded out into a comic book label. I'm not sure how that would work. Would they come up with some hybrid blend? Hopefully the case, number one thing should be the case being tamper resistant and increased security on the case, along with UV protection would be awful nice. And then on the back end, I think there's some fun things that they could do. They already have a set registry, so PSA already has all that built out. On the census, it would be interesting to see a company track newsstands and double covers and triple covers and Mark Jewelers and all those little niche things that people pay a massive premium for, but aren't split out on the CGC census. Since PSA would be starting from ground zero, they could do that right from the get. And I think that would be pretty interesting as well. To me, the biggest thing would be, what would they do with the grading scale? Now, PSA obviously is traditionally a 10-point scale. However, they skip 9.5, at least for cards. It goes, 7, 7.5, 8, 8.5, 9, and then it jumps to 10. And they do not have a higher grade above 10. On comics, this is the CGC scale, and this is pretty much the industry standard. There is a Gem Mint 10, which you basically see nothing in. For the card people watching this video, think Beckett Black Label. They have a Mint 9.9, think BGS 10 Pristine for the card people watching this video. And then a 9.8 is basically a PSA 10. That's the common grade. That's the common high-end grade that pretty much everyone shoots for. Now, CGC has caused some ruckus lately with a 9.9 pre-screen, basically saying that, hey, we think a lot of books out there that got graded 9.8 might really be 9.9. Why don't you send them on back into us? We're going to roll out this pre-screen thing. Maybe we'll give you a little bumpity bump. That has people mad. One, because it would undercut the value of current 9.9s for those invested in it. Two, it could hurt the value of 9.8s if all of a sudden 9.9s become more prevalent. And it's also would just be a cash cow for CGC. So the question is, and this is, I am not a hardcore comic book grader. I buy stuff mostly already slabbed, and I basically go with the buy the book, not the grade philosophy of I buy what looks nice to me, what has good eye appeal. Because I am buying comics typically to collect, and I'm not buying raw to send in to grade. I don't have a lot of experience in that. My question would be, if you were starting from scratch, does this grading scale still make sense? I think it would be tough to swing the market to a 10-point grading scale, but I think it's at least worth having the discussion. What my general thought is, and I've talked to a few other people about this, so I'm not reinventing the wheel here. You would have a PSA 10 would basically be a 10, a 9.9, and a 9.8 all wrapped in the one would be a PSA 10. Then they would have a 9.5. And essentially a 9.4 and a 9.6 would be a PSA 9.5. And then a 9.0 and a 9.2 would basically be a PSA 9. And then from there on down, it's the same. You have an 8.5, 8.75, so on and so forth. And then when you get down to the lower grades, you have a 1.5, 1.8, 1.0.5. I think all that stuff you could probably get rid of a 1.8 and just go with a just go with a straight half grade all the way up. The only tricky part is between 9 and 10. I could see the argument for coming in without changing anything and just adopting this scale. One thing I might consider if you wanted to go with the existing scale is maybe you eliminate 9.9 and you combine 10 and 9.9, and then you have a 9.8, so on and so forth. The more I think about it, the more I am coming around to the idea of just make 9.8, 9.9, and 10 all 10 and be done with it. Just make it simple. And then a 9.6 and a 9.4 is a 9.5, and a 9.0 and a 9.2 is a 9.0. Just be a PSA 9 in that case. Very curious for your thoughts and comments down below on specifically if you had to start over, what type of grading scale do you think makes sense? If PSA came into the market, would you want to see them pick up CGC and the industry standard grading scale, or would you like to see them kind of reinvent the wheel a little bit, shake things up slightly? I could see arguments for both. But I am beginning to come around on the 9.0, 9.5, 10. And we all know, part of PSA's rise to power over the last few years has been the fact that they have a 10 as their primary grade. I mean, look at Beckett. Beckett, one of the biggest things that kind of hold them back was the BGS 9.5. As the modern collectors came in, they just wanted 10s. The amount of times over the years I had to explain that a BGS 9.5 is the same thing as a PSA 10 would boggle your mind. People just want a 10 grade. So if you had 10 as your primary grade and don't get cute with like a high-end chase grade that's hardly ever going to get presented anyway, maybe it's time to reshake that shake that snow globe up at the top of that grading scale and roll out a 9.0, 9.5, 10 as your standard grading scale. I don't know. Like I said, curious for your thoughts and comments down below. Could something like that work? Or would people get triggered by it, for lack of a better term? What else would you want to see? If PSA decided to come into the market, what other disrupting factors would we like to see from what I would consider, just off name brand alone, a legitimate competitor to the marketplace, to CGC? And I do think it's something we legitimately need. Even if PSA never catches up to CGC, even if PSA just became a very solid second choice, it would bring accountability to CGC. CGC would have to look over their shoulder and be like, oh, we need to actually roll out these improvements. We can't just rest on our laurels. I think that part of it would be a win-win for everybody. It would give the comic book collecting world a good second option and push CGC to be better. And then you'd have those two fighting between each other, and you might actually see some innovation and improvement between those two companies. I don't know. Like I said, curious for your thoughts and comments down below. I do think this is something PSA should do. I would not be surprised if this happened at some point in time. I don't know if that would be this year, next year, 5 years down the road. It just seems like the obvious choice. And I don't know that they would have to start from the ground up. There is no easy acquisition target. Beckett's not going to let CBCS go. And then on the comic book side, there really isn't anybody else. PGX and EGS have their own demons that they're dealing with. And quite frankly, they're so small that they'd be better off just to start from scratch. Would they need a big name brand to come on board as like a head grader or partner with someone to bring some legitimacy to the grades? Would they offer cleaning and pressing like CGC does? I would have to imagine they would, just to be able to compete in that field. Would they roll out some sort of CGC signature series, like the PSA version of that, for autographs? I'm surprised, actually, the PSA doesn't have something like that in cards already. They obviously have autograph authentication, so you could, like you can with Beckett with CBCS, you could send signed books in and have them authenticated through PSA's autograph authentication, which is very reputable. So, like I said, just some food for thought. We'll see what happens. Curious for your thoughts and comments down below. This is one of those ones where I am, as much as I'm putting my opinion out there, I am almost more curious to see what you all are going to say in the comments down below. Catch you boys and girls on the next one. Peace.